Welcome everyone, this is Denny and Karl with Get Wisdom. Today we're going to continue with the channeling series, and today Karl's going to channel George Adamski, who is a figure that probably some of our viewers would have thought that we would have channeled a long time ago, because he was probably the first person in the modern era that really came forth as with contact claims with ETs, like beings from flying saucers. And he actually was able to develop a worldwide organization that was pretty well established in the early 50s. So his name is George Adamski, and that's our subject for today. We're going to do things a little bit differently in the interest of time. On this go-around, we're just going to use a couple questions, but we think we're going to get right to the heart of the matter with George with these two questions. And I will also be reading the little intro. So for to help those people who generally consume these channeling series via podcast or via audio, in the way that we usually do it, there's just a scrolling text, and you need to watch the video to find out the details about the channeling subject before we start. So that's another little change that we're going to introduce for today, just to see how it works, just to see if it's something that meets with your approval. So thanks everybody for joining us, and thank you, Karl. And Karl and I will have a little discussion about what we're up to. I'll read this intro about George, and then we'll do the channeling. Thanks, Karl.
All right, thank you, Denny, for hosting this, and we'll see how this goes. This is dusting off history a bit, reaching back to today's subject. But you're correct that this was someone who was right on the path of disclosure of this issue, that people have seen things in the skies all through human history, and it's recorded in various ways, depicted in sculptures and paintings and many stories that have survived, and even things arguably in the scriptures. So someone who really seemed to have made a contact and a breakthrough in interacting with an alien civilization is a real turning point. It ought to be, because half the world today is still waiting for that to happen. They're still scanning the skies. I think there's still some kind of outreach through radio astronomy to look for signals coming, because obviously aliens could never come here because the distances are so vast. That's what conventional science preaches to us. And we know that that's not true. And extraterrestrials are actually here, and they've been here all through human history. So there's something about these stories that leads to another conclusion. It's not just necessarily a demonstration that ETs can interact if we're open, but when it happens, there's another agenda going on, and I think that's likely what we're going to hear about.
Yeah, and one of the things I allude to in both questions is was he used as kind of like a template for everything that came back? And if you go back, there's a website devoted to this guy that's based out of the Netherlands. It's got pictures of all the books he wrote, very detailed biography, a lot of the other information. There was apparently sightings of this guy after he had died. Like he showed up kind of like a resurrection scene from the Bible. Basically, George showed up again, and there he was. I was able to touch him or something. Like stories that are almost akin to something like that about him coming back. So there's kind of like I wouldn't say a cult, but there's still quite a following for this guy. And if you go back and look at that, and you look at the books he wrote and stuff, the themes are repeating. It's the same thing that we see now. We go to some of these frontline figures that are talking about benevolent ETs trying to assist humanity, and you go back and look at George's stuff, and it's almost carbon copy. So there's this template that was created through his work almost. That's the impression I got when I looked at it. He was born in 1891. He died in 1965 of a heart attack. He was a Polish-American author who became widely known in ufology circles and to some degree in popular culture. After he displayed numerous photographs in the 1940s and 1950s that he said were of an alien spacecraft, claimed to have met with a friendly Nordic alien space brothers. We call them space brothers. So that term space brothers originated with George Adamski, and claimed to have taken flights with them to the moon and other planets. Adamski was the first and most famous of several UFO contactees who came to prominence during the 1950s. Adamski called himself a philosopher, teacher, student, and saucer researcher. Although most investigators concluded his claims were an elaborate hoax and that Adamski himself was a charlatan and a con artist. Adamski authored 3 books describing his meetings with Nordic aliens and his travels with them aboard their spaceships. Flying Saucers Have Landed, co-written with Desmond Leslie in 1953, Inside the Spaceships in 1955, and Flying Saucers Farewell in 1961. The first 2 books were both bestsellers, and by 1960 they had sold a combined 200,000 copies. In addition to his contributions to ufology in the United States, Adamski's work became very popular in Japan and helped inspire many depictions of aliens and UFOs in post-war Japanese culture and media. So in 1957, he took a tour after his two books were out, and he started this thing called the Get Acquainted program. And his contactees were supposedly Venusian, and the descriptions there would led me to believe from the work that we've done at Get Wisdom that they're probably Arcturians. So they were the human-looking type species that we've heard other interactions with, But here again, could have been shape-shifting reptilians. We don't know. I mean, there's some speculation that could be cleared up in the answers to these questions. I'm not sure. It's hard to say.
Yeah, well, I think we'll get some answers along those lines, assuming he did make some contacts with these beings.
Yeah, it was supposedly on November 20th, 1952, and the being identified himself as Orthon, Orthon, from Venus, and this was in the Coxcomb Mountain Hills in the Colorado Desert Center, California. And telepathically engages Adamski as witnessed, so he had witnesses, and the witness story is kind of interesting, as witnessed by George and Betty Williamson, Alfred and Betty Bailey, Alice Wells, and Lucy McGinnis. So, and they gave him this symbol, and I'll put this when we do the question too, but this is a symbol that he used, and he said the Venusians actually gave him this symbol, and it's described as the male and female element. They kind of look like the letters R here. But this is a symbol that he said was given to them and became kind of a moniker for the Get Acquainted program. That's what he called it.
Okay. Fellow travelers. Time for a picnic. And,
yeah. And there's one other thing that I wanted to mention before we started, is that we do have an account of a contactee, much more modern, where it was in fact benevolent ETs that contacted this guy, and then later on, it was it ended badly for badly from our perspective for the benevolent ETs that contacted him, and I think this was also somewhere in Southern California, and then it turned out that the whole operation got taken over by Anunnaki psychics after it was closed down. So that's the only example that I know of, for sure, based on the channeling work that you've done, where we have an account like this, where it started out on the up and up. But it was arguably a situation where these divinely aligned beings, weren't so divinely aligned in this case, because it was kind of a leading situation. Maybe they shouldn't have contacted this fellow, right. And it didn't go well. They were found out, and then apparently, my understanding is that this communication continued, but he wasn't communicating who he thought he was communicating with anymore. So I don't know. There could be elements of that in this. I don't know.
Well, we'll hopefully find out and see if there was something legitimate involved here, or if this was entirely some kind of deception. I know that's been the rule, that's always what wins out, because we're essentially controlled and constrained here on Earth and nothing happens that the extraterrestrial alliance doesn't get wind of eventually and then seek to suppress or constrain it in some way.
And that's one of the hardest ideas to sell in this whole thing that's being presented from Get Wisdom, is that it's total. It's a total controlled scenario. The bright spots, the divinely aligned spots, are very few and far between. And most people just can't integrate that into their worldview. It's just too far-fetched.
Yes, and I know, and it's frustrating for everyone on both sides of that issue, because it's like any kind of non-uniformity is disquieting, disturbing, and it's something that you at least feel like you have to reckon with to some degree. And many people can easily dismiss things they don't believe or don't agree with. But serious, open-minded people who really will pause and take things under consideration, you realize pretty quickly there's not much you can confirm about any of these things, because there's so little concrete evidence. It's always stories, it's always anecdotes and descriptions from witnesses and so on. And we know that can take you just so far, certainly in terms of being definitive and authoritative. And it's a struggle we all have. So I can talk to the Almighty, but if people don't believe I'm doing that, they're done, and that's that. It has no value for them whatsoever.
And I think
I
think that's a good point. And I try to bring that up with people new to Get Wisdom. I said, well, I think the first question you need to ask is whether is Karl channeling creator or not. And that's probably the most important question when you first encounter Get Wisdom. There might be a lot of things that resonate with you and everything. But I think that question needs to be answered definitively in your mind before you proceed on to anything else, so that so then it's actually useful to you or not. Because if everything is a speculation and you're cherry picking, well, you could do that anywhere.
Well, this is the problem, and so as a seeker and seeking to be open-minded in everything that I do, and that's how I had a scientific career for many years, because you have to be open-minded to do good science. Otherwise, you start to fool yourself, and you pursue things longer than is smart, and you waste a lot of time and effort, and then ultimately fail. And the whole scientific enterprise is a kind of bag of worms, and has been. And that's a whole other discussion.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, for the record, I started out just like all these other folks. I read Adamski's books when I was a kid.
Okay.
And it always seemed a little hokey to me, because the evidence was inadequate, in my view.
Right.
The photographs didn't ring true to me. And I think I'm now realizing I was intuitively perceiving that. I didn't know then.
Right.
I had intuitive ability. I was completely a newbie and ignorant. But I believed for a long time that UFOs were real. I had a knowing, and now I can see that it's true. And they do come here. But I assume, because of the intellectual part of me and seeing the lines of evidence and the chinks in the armor of the established order and so on, there's more going on than they tell the public. So I thought, like most people, there's some government involvement with this. They know more. They're the authorities, after all. They've got all the technology to do intelligence work, and they're monitoring the skies and all this. And so they have to have run into this. But they're not telling us about it. So there's got to be an important reason. And so I always believed growing up that there is a revelation that needs to come when they come forward and come out of the closet and say, oh yeah, these beings are here, they've been here for some time, blah, 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 whatever the story turns out to be. But not that it was an invasion done behind the scenes to co-opt us without firing a shot.
Right.
You see, that never occurred to me.
Right.
And
the world they created was created so that wouldn't occur to you.
Well,
right? And to everybody else for that matter.
Right. So I was swept up into the disclosure movement, so to speak, for many years. This movement to get the truth out.
Right.
Let's find out what the government knows, and let's get it all out in the open.
Right.
Because it's likely to benefit humanity. And so people have cynically thought, well, it's just the military wants to control it because they can use this as a military ally or something, and they don't want other countries to have access, that sort of thing. Yep. So the evil is the government and the military.
Right.
Keeping this from really evolving culturally.
Yeah, it's the ultimate stick and carrot scenario that could just go on infinitely. Yeah. Okay, so but that point is, I'm sympathetic to that position, and was for many years. But what I found when I channeled the divine realm, that isn't what's going on. Right.
And it turned out to be very, very dark. And I did not want to hear those things.
Yeah, and that came about from your channeling work trying to improve the LHP. Right?
Right.
That's the sequence of events here. The channeling was in service not so much to satisfy your own curiosity, but to actually help your clients.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I didn't go looking for it, but I found alien implants in people intuitively on a regular basis, and accounts of people who struggle with being manipulated in various ways that I subsequently learned was real and was true. This is being done by aliens. So this is not fair play.
Right.
This is an invasion of sovereignty in the most egregious fashion.
Yeah, and it's also one of the most undigestible stories or explanation for things in the make, as the main course. I was going to say as a side dish, but it's not. It's the main course. It's the big hill that everybody eventually needs to climb if they're going to get around to the solution for all of this, which is why we're here. Yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and you can start channeling George Adamski for everyone, and we've just got a couple questions, and I think it will be worth the time spent.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. It'll be interesting, at least. All right. I will connect to Creator of all that is to connect me, in turn, to George Adamski in the light, so he can speak through me, and to keep safety around the work. That's how I do my channeling, to be sure I reach the right target. I'm not just relying on my raw psychic ability and desire, and also to keep imposters out of the picture, because they will answer the call, always, with any intuitive outreach, no matter who is doing it and when and why. So this is a danger for everyone, because you'll get interacting with all sorts of beings that aren't good for you. And so if you go through the divine, you can ask for safety, divine protection, but you must be a believer. So increasingly, people aren't prepared to use their abilities wisely and well, because in this world, you need divine help. It's just that simple. So that's how I do my stuff, and most channelers do not, and they're not talking to who they think they are. So that's my caution about channeling. It is a delicate business. No question about it.
Okay.
All right. He will announce now when he is on board.
Okay. Thank you.
This is George Adamski speaking.
Thank you for joining us. Back in 1957, you initiated the Get Acquainted program. That incorporated a symbol given to you by your Venusian ET contacts. And much of the information and emphasis is very similar to some of the various so-called exoconsciousness organizations, which claim to be using higher intelligence from benevolent extraterrestrials contacting humans through telepathic means. Has anything changed? What are the telltale signs, if any, that might indicate that something here is amiss?
The first thing many hearing this for the first time and not knowing the history might say is, the very idea of a Venusian civilization is rather improbable given the impossibly harsh conditions on Venus as a cloud-covered planet, but whose clouds are largely noxious substances that would not be compatible with biologic life as you know it. This is a big red flag that would not hold up long today, although there are always marginal individuals with wild stories and beliefs, most of whom have heard this not second or third hand, but many hand exchanges over the years and have picked this up because it also fits with mind control manipulation ongoing worldwide to shape beliefs about extraterrestrials. This is a big subject, and we will try to keep this focused for you, endeavoring to stay within the confines of what you are most wanting to know here. I was indeed a kind of cultural icon. I did have an encounter with alien beings, but they misrepresented their origin to make it seem more compatible and more palatable with human notions, cultural expectations, and to be seen as something more likely than not, given your science tells you interstellar travel is impossible. In that era, no one would believe a story about extraterrestrials coming from another star system. So the beings I interacted with were not Venusians, they were Arcturian beings. This is a civilization, one of three principal members in an extraterrestrial alliance, who have been present and interacting on the Earth for tens of thousands of years, almost from the very beginning of the modern human. The reason is they are galactic predators, advanced civilizations that are corrupt and lacking morality and ethics because they are opportunistic psychopaths in the level of depravity they represent. They look like humans, some of them, the Arcturians in particular. They appear attractive and are highly intelligent. And the fact they have been interacting with humanity all along the way since the times of Atlantis gives them full awareness of human culture, languages, expectations, as well as the ongoing strategies through which the extraterrestrial alliance dupes every human being on the planet on a regular basis. Many of your ideas, much of what goes on in the culture, comes from them because it is how they want you to think. So at this very outset of my interaction, the deception started at the very beginning with me, with the intention of planting a seed in human consciousness and within the culture to pave the way for broader acceptance of an extraterrestrial presence and potential greater influence on things. So they were wanting to inaugurate the precedents for a kind of friendly interspecies acquaintanceship and eventual friendship. So they were professing to be here to help, to offer information and an exchange, and use myself as a spokesperson. This did not happen by accident. They selected me because they were aware of my existence, because I was sending out my intuitive senses into the cosmos. I was a kind of rogue thinker, and always had been. This they knew about me, and they knew I would be someone who would react well to the kind of plan they wanted to implement, and would be a kind of delivery boy to bring their message forward and start a discussion going, to test the waters, and to pave the way to further examples of interactions and sightings of alien craft and alien beings at times, to acclimate humans to this reality: you are not alone. This is a very dark chapter in human history currently unfolding now. You were safer when the extraterrestrials were working behind the scenes than you are today when they want to come out in the open at long last. They have conditioned you to be intrigued, and many to want this to happen. But we can tell you it will not end well. The deception will widen and it will deepen. This is planned for and being orchestrated as we speak through many means. They have a plan in place to present a scenario of extraterrestrial involvement and manipulation. It is a dastardly plan, and it is truly evil in its intentions and its scale. It has a long, sorry history of precedents where extraterrestrials have caused untold suffering through the millennia of human beings, as well as plundering and even destroying other worlds throughout your galaxy to enslave, ensnare, manipulate, subjugate, and destroy whole cultures. This they have done on the earth, and cleverly from behind the scenes in modern times. So you only see their human minions, their human actors they employ to carry out their schemes. So you have come to distrust fellow humans because you are often harmed because of them. And all of the fighting and all of the squabbling, all of the seemingly unbridgeable gaps in cultural perspectives, even religious beliefs, have been created and worsened to keep you at odds with one another and keep you agonizing over the many points of friction in your world. This is a terrible result from encountering other beings from another place. It is the last thing you would ever want to see happen, to have an alien land and take over your planet functionally and run it into the ground, literally, through a massive wave of assault, insult, and injury, one after another, and then simultaneously. Today, they are busy causing pandemics at the same time as inducing financial collapse, political warfare, getting people to the brink of murder and beyond, and all of the faulty institutions that plod along with blinders and never make great progress. This is the legacy that I was witness to at an early stage to bring disclosure into the current affairs and discussion and expectations of human society. What I did with the information was done because I was manipulated to represent it in the ways that I did. I took liberties at times because I was not privy to counseling at my side for the whole duration of my life. I was given instructions telepathically to manipulate me. So this was not a true collaboration. It was a co-opting of my being, in effect. They let me lead my own life because they did not care about me whatsoever, other than as a potential messenger of strategic value for them. But it was one of many they have initiated. Most humans are not willing to become a public figure on their behalf. And this is for many reasons. Some resist their manipulations and are frightened by it and are not the potential suitable spokespersons they think. That might well be due to the person being too greatly in divine alignment and seeing through the ruse and becoming literally terrified at what they are experiencing and what they sense about it. You are only seeing the tip of an iceberg that has been created here to promote this shift in thinking. For millennia, they have worked to keep the secret of their presence. The reason being, even though they look down on humanity as merely animals, an inferior species, and totally worthless and expendable other than as a curiosity and a kind of plaything. They also find you to be difficult to manage, to keep in order and keep in control of. this has piqued their curiosity and attempts to better understand it, you would have been annihilated long ago without that particular advantage you hold in being different, something new. That is provisional, however. What we are pointing out here is that this would-be friendship is entirely one-sided. It is not an offering of friendship at all. It is a deception to mislead and engender complacency, even enthusiasm for more of an interaction. We will be getting into this in detail, but everything I did to support their proposed agenda was a simplistic idea coming from myself largely in what they could use as a lever to first manipulate me and use me in turn to manipulate others. This is why the story can work. If it is in part confabulated by a human being or borrowing heavily from prior human thinking to make it fit the current cultural environment, they have learned this will slip in and be embraced, and then often followed, and sometimes with great enthusiasm. This they have worked to refine. They have essentially been controlling the entirety of humanity all along. So there is little without the likelihood they will use it against you in the end. And there is little you can do about it unless you know the deception is underway. So this is what we most want to put on the record with this exchange. This was a signal moment in the initiation of the disclosure movement. It needs to be looked at carefully. Those old works of mine need to be taken out and examined closely because they are a premier clue that the entire disclosure movement is a deception and a contrivance to benefit the extraterrestrial alliance. When they choose a story that cannot possibly be true in important particulars, that begs the question, why would they do that? Why are they lying, even as they are attempting an exchange in friendship? You will see that again and again in everything that has unfolded since. There is always a poison pill. There's always something being hidden and held back. This is a warning that I was used as a weapon against the world. It should be taken seriously, examined carefully, and used as a rightful piece of evidence to create a clear picture of this puzzle that still intrigues many. But the move is on, and they will roll over you if you let them.
Okay, thank you. You are often cited as the first prominent UFO researcher with claims that you encountered and communicated with a physical extraterrestrial being, namely Orthon from Venus, on 20th of November 1952. You've answered this question partly already, but I want to continue and see what other thoughts you can relate to us about this, because I think it's important. Could your contact claims and resulting explanations about cosmic reality be viewed as a template for others in the so-called disclosure movement until the current day?